I told this joke last year, they put you in these rock star mics, and then I'm going to try to figure out, okay, what rock star? There's Fall, Fat, Balding, David Crosby, Crosby, Still, Nash and Young, or Meatloaf. I guess when they close the doors, they'll be like here.
Give them a couple more minutes.
All right. See, now is when I wish I brought rock band. Wailing and Wales. Waiting for them to close the doors, I guess. Before we get started, can I just see a nice show of hands? How many educators or people involved with education are present today? Wow, that's awesome. Thank you for coming. Thank you everybody for coming. I really appreciate that. You ready? Okay. Welcome to the session, making sure that SharePoint solutions your team has created don't go to waste by lackluster user adoption. It's a long, fancy title that's just saying, I'm going to try and talk to you about all the things that we learned in the many years that my team, my students, and I have been working with SharePoint and designing sites. I'm Lou Zulli. I'm from St. Pete, Florida. My program's from St. Pete, Florida. And what we're going to talk about is this. Are you frustrated that no one is using your SharePoint site? I mean, really, is there outdated information on it? Do you have an unfriendly, out-of-the-box, kind of boring design? Is there difficulty finding what you need? Is there a lack of ownership? Bring up a site, nobody uses it. The person leaves. Nobody takes responsibility for it. And this last one is very, very, very important. I'm going to harp on this one a lot. Is there no mobile device access or support? Do you really want to go to this vision where everybody is in there, on your site, different portions of it, using it, making sure that the knowledge, the institutional knowledge, is being used? That's what we're going to talk about. What I'm going to cover creating a shared vision. That's our first step, involving key decision makers. Monitoring and responding quickly to user needs. Again, mobile, mobile, mobile. Then our key points to take home. And we will open it up for questions from the floor. I want to say I'm very, very enthused by how many people have shown up for this. And I, again, want to thank you. Creating a shared vision is our first step. When we sit down as a team, my students and I, we need to create this shared vision. Well, what is our shared vision? We have to identify the audience or the purpose. That really becomes the central part of beginning any development in SharePoint. You have to identify who is going to be using this. It's not going to be business process in our case. In most cases, it's not a business process because you can't identify a process as a purpose. I've kind of learned that from experience. It is not going to be to foster collaboration or to share information. In our case, it is how we can make our students more successful. It's important. So how do we make our students more successful? Well, the first step is to involve my IT staff, which is my students. They intrinsically know how students work. So we involve them in designing the solutions. But we also know that to make our students successful, we have to make our teachers successful. Because if our teachers are successful, our students are successful. Now, to make our teachers successful and our students successful, we have to be able to make our admin team successful. To make our admin team successful, we have to make our support staff successful. Once we have done all of that, we have made our students successful. Each and every step along the process is designed to make the end result, having our shared vision, making our students successful. Now I want you to think in your own specific terms, in business terms, that same scenario. How do we make our people successful? What tools can we give them to make them successful? Because if our employees are successful, if the department is successful, if our students are successful, then the intrinsic value, the capital that is so important all the way through any endeavor is realized. That's what's really important about creating a shared vision. So, here's some quick examples. When we're deciding, my staff and I, we decided, okay, we're going to Office 365. We're going to do this. We are going to take that leap and we're going to move our entire process to Office 365. So we sat down and we realized what we had on-prem and we started this map. We started listing what's going to stay on-prem, what's going up to the cloud, what we're going to do for mobile device management, what we're going to need for infrastructure, and all of that. That began the re-imaging of our services. Well, then we took it one step farther. We took that really basic idea, and now we mapped it out on whiteboard. So we take the thought process and say, okay, this is kind of what we're going to do. This is how we're going to put it together. This is what's going to stay on-prem. This is what's going to go up in the cloud. We tried to draw our interactive map to it. This is how they're all going to interact. What important things on Office 365 are going to be used? How are they going to be used? How are we going to access them? All of these questions. You notice what we have up there is YAML, link. All of that material that we didn't have on-prem before, we're now leveraging. How are we going to do it? And then Once we got that done, we wrote it out in Visio. We actually created that in Visio. We then took this map and involved our next step, the key stakeholders. And we showed them what we were going to do. So we were building a shared vision for the entire IT department, my students, to enable other students to be successful, to enable teachers to be successful, to giving them the tools to be successful. This is the first step in a creation of a successful implementation. Because if we're not all on the same page, then we're not all going to understand what we want the final product to look like. As I said, the next step is to involve your key decision makers. Now please understand, I am building this from the perspective of a school. But whatever you see here, I want you to substitute and automatically plug in the people in your own organization, okay? So, here are the key decision makers in our average American high school. You have your principal, assistant principal, guidance counselor, academic coach, teacher, support staff, IT staff, and your students. Notice where students are at the very end? Well, we have an interesting game that I play with all of my incoming network assistants and students. And if you come to my program tomorrow, you'll really get to meet them and understand what they do in a much more in-depth presentation. But I say, I want you to design, I want you to put down, in order, reorder this list for me. Who's most important to least important? And without fail, this is how they come up. They always put the principal first, then they put the staff, then they put the assistant principals, academic coach, teachers, support staff, students, and the poor little guidance counselors are at the end because the students really don't listen to their guidance counselors. But you notice what they've done? They've even placed themselves as students towards the very end. So what I have to sit there with them and succeeding, my advanced network assistants or the ones that have been there for a long time, we sit down with them and we show them this. Everything begins with our IT staff. This is really the true order of what we do in our program. Everything starts with the IT staff, who then involve the teachers and the students. Why are we involving the teachers and the students right from that spot? Anybody want to hazard a guess?
They're the coal-face.
Pardon me?
They're the coal-face. They're the people
Exactly. But we also give it back to our shared vision. Who do we want to be the most successful? The students and the teachers, because they are then the most successful. But yeah, we bring it back to the students and teachers. Then, after we start designing our solutions, and after we kind of involve them, we bring in the principal, assistant principal, and guidance counselors. My kids go out. We show them the bare bones of the code, or we start showing them our solutions, or we get their input. Now, little trick. We either want them to write off on what we're doing, or if they have some suggestions that it really does advance the project, we'll include it. But we've also been able to filter out over the time, saying, yeah, that's really not going to work, but we don't tell the principal that it's really not going to work. We just kind of say, oh, that's a really good idea, and then just don't use it. Then we bring in the support staff and the academic coaches, again, with the same type of process. Here's what we're bringing. Here's the solution. Can you add anything to it? And then as we go and make it public, and we're going to deploy it, before we do that, we bring it back to the students and the teachers and say, this is almost the final version. Can you please tell us what we need? Are we on the right track? Is it going to happen? And then, after it's written off, it's out there. So you see, we kind of do a circular user adoption involving the key decision makers. The plan becomes, it starts with us, but we involve teachers and students, and then we move through that hierarchy of people, bringing it back to the teachers and students. Now think of your own departments. You might have the guy that signs the paycheck coming down and saying, I want this in our SharePoint site. Well, that's great. Yes, sir, you're the boss. I'm signing my paycheck. We will do that. But as you design it, you've got to bring the people in that are going to be most affected to it so that they can have their input. It's still the boss's idea. It's still the implementation of the boss, but it's been designed for the end user. Which brings us to our next slide. We design the end user first. We always have to think about that end user. Over the years, the students of the Network Systems Administrator program have been successful ensuring campus-wide user adoption by adhering to an end user first philosophy. That's written right there in my notes. I know it because we've practiced it. We've learned from just an amazing amount of mistakes. Over the years, we have made as many mistakes as we can in implementing SharePoint sites, collections, and solutions. We've learned from them. And what we've learned, and one of the most important things we've learned is that we have to understand that too many people work too hard and not smart. That we've come to realize it's not how many hours you work, but how you work during those hours. We also have an intrinsic value because we live in the actual space that we work. These kids live 24/7 with other kids, so they understand how they work. And they're there with their teachers for how many years have they been in the school system. So these students understand how teachers work and how they do their jobs. Does everybody recognize this? This is an out-of-the-box 2010 deployment. Yeah, this has got basic branding in it. I showed this in my slide at the keynote last year. This is kind of very difficult to work with. If you think about it, what we found when we deployed the site is user adoption across the entire collection and with our solutions was very sporadic. According to the usage metrics, we were only getting certain areas visited as much as we wanted them to be visited. So we actually went out and we interviewed all of the teachers and students to find out why. My group, they went out there and they said, oh, look, why aren't you using this? Well, we found out certain things. Nobody looked at that quick link right there. Nobody looked at this. That quick link sidebar, they didn't use it. They didn't care about it. Up here, that toolbar, that menu bar at the top, yeah, it might have been intuitive to us as IT people, wasn't very intuitive to the end user. Glossed over. Too many clicks to get to the information. They hated that. To get to some of our information, they had to click here, then there was a sub-menu, then there was another menu after that. We thought it was easy because we're IT geeks. It was our ego that was building this site. They hated this. that the basic announcement page, that says too much information. They just didn't want it. They didn't want to see that many. Now, these are specific teachers. You have to understand, teachers are probably the single most difficult people to work with. They have been put upon in the classroom, and I'm finding this out worldwide, that they have been asked to do more and more and more. So by not making their job easier, they were not adapting this. Some of our best solutions, even though it was marked right there, the campus hall pass system, which you'll come, if you haven't seen it, please come to my session tomorrow so you can see this brilliant solution. Right there. It was very difficult for them to look at, very difficult for them to get to. The printer map, which is another one of our solutions, totally hidden behind several menus. This bell schedule is probably the most looked at thing, along with, for the faculty, getting them to clock in for the morning. That was it. Did they look at this library? No. All of that was causing for very sporadic use. Even in a school where we've had a lot of success with SharePoint, this was abysmal failure by our standards. So, we sat down and we redesigned our site. What did we do? The most accessed sites or apps are now up on top. Notice, faculty time clock, computer lab, signing up for the computer labs. Large icon, easily identifiable at a glance. Little text space, large icons. Very easy to see. Immediate access. One click, boom, they're there. They see it and click. Next most accessed or wanted information. How do we know that was the next most accessed? Because we looked at the metrics and we interviewed all the people, those key decision makers. And we actually went even farther than that. We started interviewing students, a large group of students. We actually were sitting down with teachers, the students were, sitting down with teachers, watching them how they work. And this is part of the solutions that they found. General information, large and easily read. 2 announcements. They only wanted to see 2 announcements. Maybe 3 at the most. They wanted to see what was available that day on the calendar, not the whole month at a glance. They just wanted to see the one day at the calendar, what was available. If they wanted to go see what the month, they know that all they have to do is click on View All. And up will come a page, everything will be available. But right there, they just want to see today. Makes their job easier. What's going on today? Boom, it's there. They also, for some reason, wanted to see what was being done by our journalism department. Journalism department is an award-winning journalism department. They cover a lot of stories on the campus and in the community. They wanted to see that story. So we took that feed off of our main website and put it right there for them to see it, so they wouldn't have to go to the main website. And then links off-site or to tertiary pages that they thought were important. We redesigned the entire site. We rolled this out, and you cannot believe how many emails from teachers to my students saying, thank you for making this easier for us to use. It was just, couldn't believe the immediacy and impact of this redesign. We're redesigning our other site for our teacher LMS, and that's up in Office 365. And that's completely being redesigned right now. In fact, as I'm standing here, and it's, I don't know what time, I've probably got a bunch of students working overtime back in Tampa, Florida, just coding away because they want this new teacher LMS site called Catnip ready to go at the beginning of school as we roll out a new initiative. So this was our first on-prem redesign with all the basics of what we've learned, and now our new Office 365 redesign will be coming out in September. I'd like to show you pictures, but they said, oh, Mr. Zilli, don't do it, please don't do it. Not yet, it's not ready for public. When we think about using end user first, it's form and function. And it's interesting that I use the word form, because what we're going to talk about is form here. You know, for the longest time, CAT students had to choose their schedule based on, and the courses they wanted to take, based on 3 pieces of paper. They actually had to fill those out, figure out what they wanted to take, turn it into the guidance counselor. The guidance counselor would then look at that, build a schedule for them, get it approved by the parents. Parents had to sign off on it. Then it would have to go back to the guidance counselor, who would have to manually input it into the student information system. Yeah, that's not working real smart, because each one of these papers can, and they, trust me, they get lost a dozen times. Yeah, it's in my backpack someplace. Yeah, I misplaced it. Yeah, I want to change my mind. Well, if you change your mind, you have to fill out a new paper. Okay, but how many times are you going to change your mind? It becomes an exercise in futility, and there had to be a better way. So a very enterprising young student, Lauren, designed, in conjunction with the guidance counselor, to make everybody more successful, our student schedule builder. This is an online form created using standard list and library. And you know, again, I keep saying, come to my session tomorrow so you can actually see this in motion and function. And it replaces these 3 papers in one simple place. It's touch enabled. You just drag the course that you want to take and put it in the box. It then builds your schedule. Once you have said, this is what I want, you submit it. It sends off a letter to your parent. The parent just says, okay, this is okay. It comes back. Once it comes back, it goes to the guidance counselor, kicks off a workflow. The guidance counselor says, fine, we do this. Once the guidance counselor approves it, automatically goes to the student information system and resides into a bucket there as a schedule request. All of that done to replace this totally inefficient method. Students absolutely love this, because now, besides that, there's a history of everything they've taken. So they now are keeping their track of credits online, and the guidance counselor is absolutely, ecstatic, because she doesn't have all this paperwork. We've now taken her, remember that one slide, that one bullet point? People are working too hard, not smart. We've now got her working smarter, because she sees everything in the record. And whenever, she doesn't have all these papers sitting up like this on her desk that could easily get misplaced. So Lauren and the team looked at how people were working and designed a better method. We make things easier. This was our first teacher lesson planner, was the first example of how to get teachers working easier. And I tell the story often enough that we were approached one year. I was sitting in a meeting, and the district and the administration said, okay, every teacher lesson plan has to be electronically stored. You know what their idea was? They were going to have the teacher write it up, scan it, save it to a file share. Yeah, right. That was really going to make a teacher's job easier. Those are 10 extra steps. Not even printed out, waste paper, scan it, put it back in. No. They even said, okay, let's just print all this paper, we'll box it. Okay, no, that's not going to work. So I came back to my students and said, there's got to be a better way. We designed the teacher lesson plan. We tapped into all of the coursework. They did, I should say. They tapped into all of the courses, all of the essential questions and benchmarks that the state of Florida required. And they built, the first one was an InfoPath form. This one here is all client-side code now. You'll see it demonstrated tomorrow. I keep saying that, but I'm hoping you'll all come. You'll see that demonstrated tomorrow in the new client-side version of it. We got rid of the info path form and created this. Now teachers, they log in. It automatically reads their login. They know which course, that references a list which says, okay, this teacher's teaching these classes. Automatically pre-populates the form through a drop-down menu. Once you choose the course, it automatically pre-populates all of the essential benchmarks and questions and essential questions. They just go click, click, click. I'm going to teach this. Click, click, click. They fill in this information down here, and they submit. It goes into a library. That library is searchable. Unintended consequence of this is that now teachers are collaborating. Physics, working with calculus. They're saying, okay, I'm going to be doing this. The physics teacher is going to be doing this. I'm going to cover this in calculus. So now you've got cross-discipline enabled, cross-discipline education enabled. Social studies is working with English. Math is working with science. Science is working with social studies. All of a sudden, everything is now interdisciplinary, going back to making our students successful. Students have access to this to see what's expected of them. So now they know what they have to do to get a passing grade. They are more successful. This one here, our campus print map, is a great story. It is probably one of the most used sites. It was one of the earliest ones, most used solutions. One of the earliest ones we did was because we had to map out every printer. Printing is singularly one of the worst things you can do in a school. How do you teach a teacher to map, who usually are technologically, I don't want to say illiterate, but we'll say challenged, to map to a printer? Well, it's very difficult. My students hated going over there to do it. Okay, here's what we have to do. So what they did is they created this, they saw the need, they created this into SharePoint, and now it's just one click. Go find your printer on the map. That's why we have all these different printer icons. You just click on that icon. Through the magic of code, it automatically maps to the printer, creates the default printer, and you're set. This has actually been recently adopted by the district for their admin building. And now they're going to roll it out, a version of this, they're going to roll out to other schools as a way to just say, look, this is the easiest way we found to map printers. So we're making their life easier, we're getting them to work smarter, and now we're putting it all together. The campus hall pass systems probably are specifically a solution designed to increase student instruction time. I'm going to read this because it's kind of, by replacing paper hall passes and call slips with an easy-use system. The main components are the two SharePoint-based the main components, the two SharePoint-based application, and the iOS app. All read and post to the same library. The entire system was designed for ease of use by the end user. We have got a system where each student is issued one of these. While they're in class, they have a reader, a USB card reader. When they need to leave class, they just slide through the USB card reader. It generates a hall path that you see like here and here. It works because our campus hall pass monitors and system principals we're on a completely wireless campus, and they have one of these iOS devices that are reading the halls in real time. So what we have is an effective method of making a teacher's and user's life easier. And user design much easier, much better. Student instruction time has increased. because now a teacher doesn't have to spend time writing out hall passes or call slips or sending them this way. Students now are out of the halls more because they realize, oh, I've got this thing on my, on a lanyard around my neck with my picture on it, and people know where I'm supposed to be going, so I can't just wander the halls any longer, so I better stay in class. We've made our campus safer. It has increased student instruction time. Teachers are happier because they're not being interrupted constantly. It was a win-win-win scenario. By basing it in SharePoint, we drive everybody to the site. Now we have a complete reason why they are there. They discover everything else about the SharePoint site, and user adoption goes up. That leads us to monitoring quick response. Going back to this, remember, this was our first attempt. We did it in iPads. But now you see that we have a little iPod device there, or iPhone device there. You know why? Because these were always getting broken and dropped by the campus hall pass, by the monitors. So we had a lot of broken iPads running around that Apple wouldn't fix. So they would say, can we please have something smaller? Well, I got the administration to buy iPods, and we rewrote the code. The kids rewrote the code in 3 days to make it look really good on an iPod, and voila, that's called monitoring and quick response. So we have an intrinsic leg up on things. My IT staff, the students, are in the teachers' classes all the time, so they know what's going on. In fact, one of my graduated assistants named Robert Clark. This is a great story. You'll love this. We had just rolled out the campus hall pass system, and it was all web-based at that time. And it's out there, and we didn't think that a teacher had to be on the web page for it to be active. That never crossed our minds. So Robert's sitting in class one day, and he comes in and says, you know, Mr. Zulli, Miss Geithner has to interrupt what she's doing, has to go activate the web page, the student signs out, and then she has to pick up what we're, go back with her lesson. And I'm going, well, we didn't want that to happen. We're trying to make sure that everybody has it easier. I said, can I write a small piece of code that lives on the computer, intercepts the swipe from the electronic hall pass reader, from the card swipe, and just sends it to SharePoint? And I said, yes, you can. So that night he went home, wrote it, we tested it, fixed a couple bugs, and then deployed it through Active Directory the next day. All of a sudden, I sent out a notice that this is what's going on. Reboot, you'll get the application, and you won't have to have an active web page. So that's monitoring and quick response. This is another one of our solutions. What we have at the school is called teacher assistants. Basically, it's a class where students can enroll in to learn basic clerical skills and working with other teachers on helping them. It's a class. It's not the most academically inclined class, but it's a class. But all these teachers' assistants are assigned to one teacher, but they're dispersed throughout the entire school. We were approached saying, can you please help us get these teachers to create a sign-in method? And I said, sure. I turned it over to the team, and they first came up with the InfoPath version, which allows, you pick the student, and then you mark them in. Well, because teachers are teachers, and the principal and the assistant principal said, look, we want the default to be absent. We want to force the teacher to go in and set it up so that they have to mark them present, or else they would just mark everybody present. We wouldn't have valid data. Well, as you see, through InfoPath, we did this. We did it real quick and dirty, and this is what we did. This was on the old site. But very enterprising, two very enterprising members of the team redesigned it, and I'd like to show it to you, the finished version. We tap in using their pictures. It's all touch capable. All they have to do is select the person who's in the class, and now their attendance was recorded. The teacher then goes in and picks a date where they actually want to see who was present and who was absent, and then they just click a button, and that's ported over to the student information system as the proper attendance. All of this is historical data. It's in lists. So we have a very good record of which students are in which classes at which time on this as well for the teacher assistant. It has made life so much easier for this one class. Quick response. We got the first one up there, and then we had the luxury, because the first one was working, to refine it and spur a different user adoption in that method. This, I'm going to show you a statistic about use of this in the United States. Take a look at this. Research by Project Tomorrow shows that by grade level, and we're going to look at grade 9 through 12, that's where I live, 70% have broadband access, 68% have mobile 3G, 4G access. We access only school access. That's down to 6%. But take a look at this smartphone access. Look at that. Grade 9 through 12, 80% of the students have smartphone access. Look at all of you out there. A lot of you I see, rightfully so, they're using these. You're using your Surface, you're using your iPad, iPhone, smartphone, whatever. Look at that number. These are the people that are coming in the workforce soon. They're going to be expected, they are going to expect to be able to use this device over every other single possible device. This is going to be their preferred method of accessing data. They don't want to carry around a laptop. They don't want to carry around anything much bigger than this. Even iPads amongst my students are now becoming passé because they're too big. They want the capability of accessing information through this. Now, I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying that that we should replace everything with that type of device. But I'm saying this is becoming the most preferred method of accessing information, not creating information, accessing information. So what is SharePoint about? It's about accessing information. So if we're not designing for the use of this device as professionals, we're really missing the boat. And that's why we have made it very, it's our mission to make all of us, all of our data accessible through this. And I'm not just talking about responsive design. I'm talking about native apps, accessing the information. So I pointed out that our campus hall pass system we have two versions to be able to access it mobilely. This is actually responsive, so we can get it through the web, we can get it through the hall pass system native app on the iPad, or we can get it through the iPod. Look, this is a lot of fun, by the way. How many of you actually work and develop in Objective-C? See, my students, even though some of them love to use and develop for this format, before they sit down to use Objective-C, they go into the wall, they bang their head 3 times against the wall, and then sit down and try and code with it. It is pretty tough. But that's what they do. we've been able to go and take this. Now this is a teacher assignment calendar. Look at all that data right there. But we were able to do this and get that data to them through a native application that accesses that SharePoint data sitting online. So now a student just picks their teacher and they can see what is necessary for them to study and see their assignments. Actually, parents love this feature. And it's also an iPhone and iOS. We actually have an Android version, but I didn't put it up there. They begged me not to put the Android version up there because it wasn't pretty enough. So they said, no, please don't do it. Don't put it up there. So that's why it's not shown, but we do have an iOS version of it. So my point is, you have to be able to take the data and all that information sitting in the web version of SharePoint and make it accessible over every single device that can access information. Because if it's not, you're not making that end user's job any easier. You're not making, and I'm going circuitously, I'm going right back to the beginning, saying you're not enabling the conditions to make them more successful. So, I'm a fast talker. These are the lessons we learned. I'm going to leave you with these key points to take home. Your sites cannot be top-down. Key stakeholders must be involved. If the sites do not make the end users work easier, and that should be apostrophe, I thought I corrected that, I'm sorry. Work easier, they will ignore it. Be responsive to their needs. Design multiple ways to access the information. And there's an app for that. Please, as you think this through, if you take anything back with you from this session, I'd like you to take the single most important thing I would say is design multiple ways to access that information. Talk to your IT department. Find a business case for it. Have it refer right back to being more successful. Make sure that you're enabling the content, the conditions, so that the workers in your area, the students, whatever, can be successful. If those conditions aren't met, then no matter how much money you pour into a SharePoint site, it really isn't going to be successful. And you'll have that orphan look that we had at the beginning. So, we'll leave with any questions. I'm open to anything. I'm a teacher. We'll go with anything. Any questions? Yes, sir, in the back.
Yeah, integrating the data into your student management system, does that still have to be done manually?
I'm sorry?
Integrating the data back into your student management system, does that still have to be done manually?
Actually, they've given us they have opened up the APIs so that we can write to it. They won't let us write directly back to it, but they do let us drop everything into a bucket, and then their student management system will automatically pick up that data and transpose it and put it into theirs. So they've kind of worked with us in creating the bucket that all that data goes into. Yes, sir.
Talk about LMS there. Is that also SharePoint based?
Yes, we have designed our own student learning management systems in SharePoint.
And that supports all packages? And
Yes. Yes, sir.
With introducing new things, you talked about giving users what they want. How do you go about introducing something new, for example, your LMS, into their front page or onto that kind of first look?
That's exactly what my students are working on right now in their Office 365. What we're doing, and I'll read you the email. Because it's a great, Chris, one of my student assistants, actually, he was so excited, he got this, I'll find it. Excuse me for a moment as I look. Where's it? There you go. He goes, yes. I go, any progress? How's it going? Yeah, I just finished up the I'm just finishing up the dynamic pin to home feature and working on the custom teacher home pages. So when a student logs in, they will automatically get the custom pin, the dynamic pin to their session. So what they'll do is they'll quickly, we've got a list of all of the information what courses they're taking. And as they log in, the code reads what they're taking and then pins all the necessary information to their homepage so that they don't have to do it. It's not using feature pinning. We're not doing anything like that. It's just custom code that my students have written that will just read the list, go out, find the teacher's homepage, and then just put all the information on the form.
Even though it's not necessarily what they want to see.
Well, then they have the option to rearrange everything, or they say, okay, we don't want that, and they'll be able to customize their own homepage that way. But we give them all of the stuff that they should want to use, and then we allow them. And we found that with kids, some don't need all of they don't need everything from their English class, let's say, but they want more information from their engineering class. So we give them the opportunity to display what they really want on their homepage, but if they need the data, it's still there. Yes, sir?
You mentioned you redesigned your homepage, build graphics and stuff. How do you monitor that going forward and usage of that?
We're using the built-in SharePoint metrics. Yeah, and then we're kind of limited in what our budgets are, so we can't. I love some of these third-party solutions, but in case of schools, it's really tough to enable to purchase those. So we're using the built-in SharePoint metrics. Yes, sir.
I'm going to push the same question where you showed the two UIs from one A to B transformation. From my experience, I still see the A style of UI a lot in the market there.
Mm-hmm.
Did we try the training perspective to the end user training to cover the adoption of that way, or you're saying the engagement from the start, to get the feedback, to redesign?
Now that was a 2010 design that we actually brought up in 2010. And we have training every single 6 months on the use of that. And it was still teachers, if it's not immediately available, they're not going to go digging for it. And that's the big thing. So we had to redesign based on that premise. Yes, sir?
How do you manage the expectation of senior personnel, or not teachers or whatever, that their information that they want to push to the students is more important than the other person? You know, that prioritisation of information.
Good question. We actually, how do I answer this politically correct? It is, we make it available. We will couch it. Oftentimes the principal will come down and say, Lou, in fact, this is a very good example. Lou, you've heard of Common Core in the United States. It's a big deal. They're trying to standardize education across the entire country. He comes in and pops a book on my desk and says, I want all these Common Core standards in SharePoint. And I looked at that and I go, what? And he goes, I want all of these in SharePoint just like that teacher lesson planner. And I looked at him and I very politely said, if we did that, if we tried to push all of this information down to the faculty and the students, it will take us all year and we will not be able to enact any of the things that you want. We have to prioritize. Is this really important? And that's what I would say to you. You have to really talk to the person and say, is this absolutely mission critical? Will this information be absolutely necessary for the person, the end user, the teacher, or the other person to accomplish their job. If he says, well, absolutely, I would say, okay, can we test it with other users first? And more often than not, they're going to find that that information could be best delivered in a different way and not bog down the site. And I'm going to say to you, it takes a little backbone and a leap of faith that the IT staff or the people have got a track record of delivering solutions on time and appropriately, but it does work. Does that help? Does that answer your question? And I didn't want to beat around the bush, but that's kind of how we do it. I'm finding a lot of people adapting that. Any questions over here? This side's been monopolizing the room. Yes, sir.
How would you apply what you have like to other schools, seeing that not all schools have the same skill set that you have?
It's interesting. A lot of the different solutions are being adopted now. It's taken a while, and the district is actually going through with a complete rollout of SharePoint for the entire school district. So there will be SharePoint servers sitting down there available to build sites off of for the rest of the schools in the district.
Customization.
You know, we're starting to farm out my team to do customizations and to do solutions. We recently had a middle school, which would be ages 6 through 8, grades of 6 through 8 in the United States. They set it up and we designed their entire site for them. My team, I branched out a group of my kids that built their entire site for them. So my students have now gotten the reputation, thankfully to events like this, that the school district is saying, well, we've got all these experts, so let's use them. So we're branching it out.
No. So would there be a strategy to, say, just deploy it without your specific team, or is that something you're thinking about?
We did that in the past, but there has to be, there has to be an admin on somewhere on the school that understands it. And my school district is actually starting to train other SharePoint administrators. Would I deploy it without some of the background knowledge? No. Because how would they even do the basic create a list or library if they don't understand that? How would they, do you want to enable site creation? How are you going to manage to do those types of things? So, if you ever want to get in touch with me, by the way, that's Lauren Hastings. She's the one that designed the student hub, the student schedule builder. If you ever want to get in touch with me, these are my contact information. Please feel free to contact me at any time. If you have a specific, you want to talk about a specific issue or how we do things, please, I'm always open. And I hope to see some of you at my talk tomorrow, which will present almost all of the solutions that my students have done and videos of most of them in action. And, of course, thanks to all the sponsors that made this possible. Thank you.